Yes, and we're once again the World This Week in partnership with the International Herald Tribune. Matthew Saltmarsh, hello again. Hello again to Judah Grunstein of World Politics Review, freelance reporter Michael Kirtley, reporter and photojournalist. Mm-hmm. And also with us, Celestine Bolen, freelance reporter and columnist at times. We were discussing before the break Afghanistan and the firing of General Stanley McChrystal. And the context is a rough one. Michael Kirtley, you know that you've had a series of setbacks, an offensive that isn't going all that well, a surge which isn't complete. It's not the best of times, is it?
You know, when you have a situation like this, you have to wonder what would have happened if Obama hadn't done it internally for politics inside of America. I mean, Obama's being questioned, his leadership's being questioned quite seriously for a variety of reasons right now. And therefore, in terms of running the war, I don't think that President Obama would have had the authority to continue forward if he had just allowed it to happen.
So you're saying he comes out strengthened by all this?
I think, well, Truman fired MacArthur, didn't he? I mean, I don't think that Obama, at the end of the day, should say that a general is indispensable. And even replacing him by Petraeus seems to be a very interesting choice, just because where's everybody else? Are there only a few generals that can run this war? The war in Afghanistan is not being prosecuted in a way that's only run by the American generals and politicians. It's also an effect of what happens on the ground in Afghanistan and the politics of Afghanistan and the tribal situation there. So to say that one American general who was obviously causing a lot of turmoil internally in his own staff, to say that one general is indispensable for this seems to me to be absurd. So yes, I think that Obama, at the end of the day, has to come out ahead.
Is the U.S.-led coalition losing the war? Well, the U.S. Secretary of Defense certainly says no.
I do not believe we are bogged down. I believe we are making some progress. It is slower and harder than we anticipated.
Some progress, Celestine Bowen. He doesn't sound quite convinced, does he, Robert Gates?
And I'm wondering whether this will then, it's too early to say, I think, and Petraeus, what he will do to change the strategy is unknown, but there are some interesting questions that are being asked right now. Was it wise to sort of try to take the war into the stronghold of the Taliban? Might it not be better to secure the regions around Kabul and, sort of work from a position of strength and not risk your troops, which is, I think, one of the complaints that has been put at McChrystal's door, in addition to his loose lips. So I'm wondering, and I don't know the answer because I think it's so early, is whether this will kind of result in some kind of a shift of strategy, which they'll probably not display as such, but they may sort of move in that direction.
Judah Grunstein, you write on your blog today, the McChrystal episode and personnel shakeup that will accompany General David Petraeus' assumption of command should serve as a wake-up call to the internal assumptions and logical inconsistencies of the Obama administration's strategy. What do you mean?
Without getting too deep into the weeds about it, the strategy as it was formulated in December was a counterterrorism strategy to go after al-Qaeda through a counterinsurgency method, which is to stabilize Afghanistan. The idea being that when you stabilize Afghanistan, the al-Qaeda will no longer have a safe haven there. And I think that some of the developments that we saw in the New York Times article today, where the Pakistan-Afghan governments are sort of negotiating a potential turning of the Haqqani network, which might not disavow the al-Qaeda elements with which it's closely associated, shows that you can have a stable Afghanistan that is still a safe haven for al-Qaeda. And so I guess what I was saying in terms of that is that the emphasis right now needs to be on turning the tide and creating a very clear, visible initiative for coalition forces, and I think that will be the emphasis in terms of military. And then also really getting the unity of command and the unity of effort that's needed in terms of deploying the civilian and the military elements and components of the strategy in a coherent and harmonious way. And I think that that's where Petraeus has demonstrated his skills and his talents in working with Ambassador Ryan Crocker in Iraq in the past. But the fact is that there have been a number of people who have said, where's the bench? There were a handful of names that were discussed, but I think that for political reasons, Petraeus was the only one that could have.
Seems like a safe choice.
It was the one name that, having been announced, people have already forgotten Stanley McChrystal, and I think that was really the point. And if I could just add one last thing, I think that Obama really handled it in a very savvy way, because he didn't turn it into a personal thing of him against McChrystal. He turned it into something that has to do with the integrity of the chain of command.
Matthew Saltmarsh, let's talk about that New York Times Herald Tribune article that Judah was mentioning. Pakistan going deep into Afghanistan on this one, and it really shows that the U.S. administration has to really, it's pretty complicated. They have to look at both sides of the border on this one.
It's extremely complicated because, as we all know, there's a lack of stability in Pakistan, and that can so easily be further destabilized by what's going on in Afghanistan. I think more broadly, the surge itself is in a difficult period at the moment because we're seeing the offensive in the south. We're not really seeing the results coming through yet. I think the town of Marjar, the taking back of that town has been very slow, and in Helmand province, the fatalities have been rising. The longer that goes on, you sense that the more boxed in the Americans become, particularly having given themselves this July 2011 kind of deadline. The closer you get towards that without concrete results, the more people are going to start speculating about an exit strategy and how that's going to work. And again, it makes the situation that much more difficult, I think.
Final question on this, and then we'll move on. Judah Grunstein, what happens if the new man in charge doesn't get along with Afghanistan's president?
That's the weak link in the counterinsurgency doctrine, is that we're only one part of the solution, and the major part of the solution is the host government. And this is why I think there's so many reasons to think that Afghanistan is the counterinsurgency too far, and that I think that General Petraeus will be really working very aggressively to demonstrate some sort of results, to organize the civilian and military components, and to really negotiate a political settlement that provides political cover for the United States to withdraw in a position of strength or perceived strength.
All right. Sorry, we're gonna move on because we've still a lot to talk about. 52 years ago, a small West African nation defied General de Gaulle and opted for immediate independence rather than a gradual transition. Guinea has since endured 2 long-time dictators, a third coup. Last September, it all culminated with a bloodbath inside the National Stadium, dozens slaughtered and raped, with the whole world closing in on that West African nation. The junta insists it's in a hurry to leave. This coming Sunday, the mineral-rich country heads to the polls for what could be its first free and fair vote. The military says it's so keen to leave, it's deployed 16,000 soldiers and gendarmes to keep the peace on Election Day.
The National Gendarmerie has done its duty in providing security. Can we count on you?
All right. Can we count on the Michael Kirtley?
Well, you know, this is not only Guinea, this is Africa. Guinea is surrounded by examples, some of which are positive, some of which are negative. You have Mali, you have Ivory Coast, you have Senegal, and the people are similar. The problem is that I think that, no, you cannot count on anything. What you can count on is what you hear today. And I think that Konate has done a good job in terms of... the
interim leader of the junta.
Yes, in terms of presenting a plan where he himself, not only he himself, but all of the government ministers are not going to be, don't have the right to run for president or for other major positions in the new government. I think that's, while it's not a first in Africa, it certainly is a laudable effort. I think that Guinea is rife with the same problems that exist in some of those countries next door, except that they have no example. They have no positive example in their history. So now you have lots of Guineans who are very happy inside of the country. Sort of like the Africans are very happy about all the African countries that were in the World Cup. What happens now? I think that what happens tomorrow, over the weekend, is going to be a euphoric time for Guinea, and then you're going to see what happens. Because you have a tribal situation, you have the ballots that have been handed out, the voting cards that have been handing out. There's been accusation of those voting cards have been handed out in an unbalanced way. Sometimes the chieftains in the villages have said, "Are you going to vote for this way or that way?" Then you have also the tribal situation there. Are the tribal leaders going to accept the results of the vote? Are the politicians themselves going to accept the results of the vote? And what will Kanadi do at the end of the day? And also Mr. Kamara, who was sent packing to Morocco after he was shot. So I think that the problem is that we all hope, just like we do in other countries, for example, Niger, okay, which has gone through a similar period of turmoil recently. We all hope that this will set the stage for a different kind of approach to democracy in Guinea. But I always think that Africa depends on the foresight of leaders and the will of the people together, led by that foresight of leaders. Sometimes it works, and I hope that's all I can say is I hope to God that it works.
Throwing the cat in amongst the pigeons, Judah Grunstein, is once again a country where the people are poor and the country itself is extremely rich with there's everything there, including lots of bauxite and other minerals.
Well, it's the resource curse where the elites and the concentrated power tend to skim the top off the wealth, and very little gets handed down. I would just add in terms of the election, just to add a measure of moderation with transitions to democracy. It's often not the first election that's the real turning point. It's the second, where there's either a transfer of power between parties. And so I think this is a great step and also a good example for Guinea personally, and also sort of a good example in that part of Africa where there has been this sort of backsliding towards non-democratic transitions of power, but they're still not out of the woods.
All right. Now, as we said in part one, it was the week the U.S. president summoned his top NATO commander home from Afghanistan, and the week the French president summoned emblematic striker Thierry Henry for a talk after the team's very public implosion at the World Cup. Les Bleus sparking heated debate on the floor of the National Assembly, with talk of task forces to discuss the rout and the antics, of course, that surrounded it. On the World This Week's Facebook page, we asked when do sports performances become an affair of state? And let's look at some of your reactions if we could. Handis says it is a distraction. She writes, sports is politics. It keeps people in line. What better mind control than watching athletic human beings conquer a ball and manipulate it to their will? But Suruboy defends the French government's decision to call it stars to order. He writes that it's really terrible to see taxpayers' funds being spent on a bunch of unpatriotic elements who bring the name of their country to disrepute. Matthew, you're a big football fan. What do you think of the fact of Thierry Henry getting summoned to the presidential palace?
I find it faintly ridiculous, actually, that not even the captain of the team has been summoned back to explain himself to the president. And when you look at actually what's happened, the team performed very badly for a number of reasons, many of which probably have to do with the coach.
In more ways than one, they performed badly.
Exactly. There were some incidents before the tournament as well, but at the tournament, on the field, they performed very badly, and they missed a training session as well. There was a strike. They missed the training session. I think the thing actually runs a bit deeper in society, and there's now actually a sort of... They're causing a bit of a cleavage in society almost, because the team are mainly made up of young guys from the banlieue who have
from the suburbs,
from the
working
suburbs.
class suburbs.
Yeah, and there have been some racial epithets thrown around by some people saying, this team doesn't represent France and they don't like to sing the Marseillaise before the game, which is true. Actually, most of them do not choose not to sing it. And that has caused a bit of tension and maybe amplified what should really be a sporting matter. Essentially, if the team performed badly, I don't think they need to go and explain themselves to the president for doing that. They need to get a new coach and regroup, and they'll play better next time.
It's interesting. You can project what you want onto a national team, and some in this country, Celestine, have been saying they have bad manners, they act like hoodlums, and others are saying they have bad manners, they're out of touch like the political elites. Depending on which side of the political spectrum you come from, you read different things into all this.
Well, I mean, I think it's, it was sort of a natural, metaphor for all sorts of things, and it's probably going to get so overworked before it's over that we're going to wish we never knew about la honte and the shame of France. But the fact is that, it's an older, it's, the past glory gets summoned up, today's, sort of petty squabbling, in contrast, looks, the worse. The political sort of class leaping onto it. And what I would say is sort of curious is that there's so much that's understood in this debate for reasons that Matthew was just saying, and it's not really, it's a very dangerous territory. So nobody really wants to kind of plunge into that question of identity and so on. And so I think that may make it all the more sort of tense as a debate.
Michael Kirtley, what do you think of the fact that football is in fact dominating the news cycles? Is that a good thing or a bad thing in this case?
Well, what's interesting is, having just come from America, it's also dominating the news cycles in America, especially the sports. On sports stations in America, I've never seen the World Cup covered, or even soccer in general, covered in any way like it's covered today. I guess it's no more vuvuzelas for the French in a certain sense. We can't imagine in America that an American president would somehow say that any sports team would be worth having a political action towards, except to congratulate them, or maybe to criticize somebody in particular. You couldn't imagine this. So in France, what is the specificity here? I think that it has to do with, as been mentioned, a kind of national identity about this team, that where you want to identify with the national team, but you want to criticize it because it doesn't look like certain parts of French society.
Okay, even in the U.S., where soccer is for sissies, according to some, even their football mixing with politics, like when the visiting Russian delegations in town. Let's listen to Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, compare the food at the engagement to the U.S.'s last-minute win against Slovenia. But more importantly, listen to his U.S. counterpart try and engage in jock talk about football.
That's good.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Congratulations on your soccer victory yesterday.
That was so thrilling. In fact, we were all crowded around a TV set in the White House because we were having a meeting with the president, and I don't know, there must have been 30 people jammed into the little room outside where we were going.
Did she pass the test, Judah?
I'm surprised that she revealed the fact that with everything going on in the world today, people were crowded around a TV set watching a soccer match. I just found it funny. Every time I was watching the North Korean team play, I cringed each time one of them made a mistake, thinking that when they got back, they might get summoned. But apparently it was in France that took place.
All right. It's only a game, thankfully, right? Let's hope so. Judah Grunstein, many thanks. I want to thank you, Celestine Boland, Michael Kirtley, and Matthew Saltmarsh for joining us. And thank you for watching The World This Week. Coming up, 24 hours in France. We'll be taking a look at closing arguments in the trial of the bank trader accused of blowing nearly €5 billion of Société Générale's money.